Hello, VR aficionados. I'm King Link, and today, we're going to talk about VR. So, as I mentioned in my yearly update, I recently got a brand new computer. It was Oculus ready, so I actually picked up an Oculus Rift S. I was excited because my experience at E3 kind of showed me that people are still supporting VR, at least somewhat. I wanted to see what was available out there already so I could get ready for the next wave. Now, when I got home, I bought a bunch of games on Steam during the Steam sale, and almost all of them were VR enabled. Now, with that said, well, honestly, I don't know how often I'll be talking about VR or reviewing games here, but I wanted to take a look at a few of them because, VR as a technology is very interesting. The fact is, just putting on the helmet so when you look left and right, you're still in the game alone makes pretty much any game better. It's a unique display system that can make a simple demo with one object to play take maybe a half hour or a 10-minute visual experience worth playing a few times just to see what you're missing when you look in each direction. Now, I will say that the video is almost a performance piece because you're looking at my vision for the game. I tilt my head a little bit to the left. Yeah, I know. But hopefully it's not too bad. I'll try to avoid it being too sick inducing, but we'll see what we can get out of it. Now, I do want to mention one other thing the price of these experiences. I'm going to be honest, most VR games are more expensive than I probably would pay, especially when you're talking about like a total hour of a single playthrough of these experiences being only in the couple hour range. But quite a few of these are worth the higher price because these are one of a kind experiences and they're replayable, like I've said. This isn't a normal game, mind you, where if you miss out on like a Call of Duty, you have Titanfall, Battlefield, or hundreds of other FPSs out there. Or you can even just watch someone else play the game on YouTube. There's a lot of ways to experience normal games, flat games, as people call them. But in VR, especially good VR, is kind of like an amusement park ride done well. It's a unique experience that nothing outside of the VR can capture. Now, you can tell me that the Back to the Future ride and the Simpsons roller coaster ride from Universal were functionally the same rides. But you know what? I wish I could go on those rides back to back, probably multiple times because there's like nothing else out there like it. So, with that said, though, I'm going to be talking about 4 games today. Now, I've only beat one of them so far, but I wanted to talk about a few aspects of the game rather than review the games themselves. We're going to be talking about control systems that they use, how does it actually control, the experience, and the immersion in the experience. And we're going to compare a game to non-VR game when possible. We'll rate the games based on how necessary the VR is to the experience. VR might make any game better, but is it a low improvement, a high improvement, or somewhere in the middle? And yes, we will hit each of those marks. So let's begin with the Talos Principle VR. Now, the Talos Principle VR actually had me excited. I'm a fan of the original game. In fact, I think it might be one of my favorite games from Crow Team. These are the guys who made Serious Sam. Now, I've beaten the normal game, the normal Talos Principle, and I do love puzzle games, especially really clever ones or really interesting ones. And man, Talos Principle is very clever with its level design and puzzle design. Now, with that said, I like that game a lot. How's the VR version? Well, the simple fact is any game in VR is better at a base level, I think, just for the level of immersion that's native to it. Now, there's going to be some bad games that won't be better, but the experience of being in the world is unique and why VR is so easy to enjoy in any way. Talos Principle VR, though, allows you to fully experience the world with the Oculus Rift touch controllers. And it's good. You actually, all the games I'm talking about today use the touch controllers. With them, you can reach out and grab items, you can interact with the elements of the world, you can move boxes and cameras, you can place whatever you want, where you want. It's what I expected when I heard about this game. VR, though, is always going to have a small problem with movement. There's a lot of choices with how to move with VR, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not well versed in exactly why things work in some games and don't work in others, but for the Talos Principle VR, it doesn't really work with movement, and it's one of the things I didn't like. There's almost a teleport experience when you're moving in the Talos Principle VR. It's like a quick flash rather than a smooth transition. It just doesn't work that well. Now, at the same time, I've only put about an hour into Talos Principle VR, and the reason for this is it's the same game I've already played. If you haven't played Talos Principle, this isn't going to matter for you, but this is a game I can directly compare to the original game. And, well, if a new player asked, VR is perfectly fine here, but I also think it lacks a real purpose to a person buying the game a second time. Also, teleportation, like I said, I'm not really sold. I think using an Xbox controller could have worked better, and personally, the warping is a big piece. The movement of objects in the world works, but it doesn't add enough to the world outside of better aiming of objects. It's cool to move your head and aim your beams, but I just don't think it's that important. Now, this isn't a very expensive game. I bought it for $6 during the sale, and I think it only goes for about $10 the normal price. This is the same price as the non-VR version of the game, but honestly, VR makes any game better, but I think you could be safe going with either version here. So for this VR integration, I'm going to give this a low improvement. It's still a good game, but the VR doesn't add much to the experience. What is strange, though, is I thought this would have been an easy win, and I liked the original game, but for some reason, it doesn't work that well. Now, if you want something that does work well, next up we're going to come to the Climb. This is a VR-only experience, so I can't compare it to a base game. It's created by Oculus, so it is limited to just the Rift S, and the Quest. It's basically Oculus' store. So sorry to other headset owners, this one's just for Oculus owners. And while I believe I can use a controller or a touch controller, look at the game. It's gotta be a touch controller. But speaking of looking at the game, yes, it doesn't look right. It's using a vertical style here. I have no clue why this game is outputting this way. I'm using the native app for it. It looks fine in the game. You're not going to really look at it on the screen like this. Maybe it's for better visibility. People might get sick if you see the widescreen version. Whatever the reason, it's perfectly fine, just has a bad output to the standard monitor. So what is the Climb itself? Well, essentially you have a giant wall in front of you and you're going to scale up it, reaching different handholds and moving around the wall. That's why the touch controllers really work here. It amounts to simple wall climbing with each grab, but there's actually an interesting stamina system as well and a chalking system that you'll see me have to use to grab places for longer. And if you have both hands on the wall, you're actually able to rest. It's just a fantastic experience. I'm actually impressed at how well it feels when you're grabbing the wall or gripping a different hold. The experience is really unlike anything else I've played, and yeah, I know I'm going to say that a lot with VR, but it's because it's true here. The graphics are also really interesting. For the most part, this game, you're going to be inches from the wall, but you can look around at different points or see interesting vistas. There's beautiful locales. When you're climbing, you might see like little critters. I think you'll see a hanging wood bridge here. Giant mammoth's head is on one level. Really, the sky's the limit here, and honestly, the Climb works well to differentiate everything you see and make you interested in seeing what's next. The big challenge, though, of the game is the leaping mechanism. And, man, it's really fun when you pull it off, but I will say, sometimes I fell, sometimes I just missed a grab. I'm unable to know exactly what I'm doing wrong. It's entertaining when it works, especially when you're climbing the more advanced areas or climbing cracks or such objects, but it also is one of those things where I'm like, I don't know about it. However, the one real negative I have for the Climb is one that I have for many Oculus games and probably all of VR. You're limited to just your head and hands. And yeah, that can work, but you can move to the left or right in the real world, but you're unable to brace your feet or push off in the Climb, and that limits what you can do. Admittedly, you can jump just magically, but whatever. Now, that would be harder to do for sure, but it is a limited experience without that. There is a bit of a stretch and an arm workout when you play the game, though, which is pretty good. So, the Climb is the type of game which I would say not only does the Oculus enhance the experience, but I think it's the only way to truly have the experience. I'm sure someone could make the same attempt as this on a TV screen. It just would never be even close to what I'm experiencing in this game, and honestly, it is so much fun. I'm going to give the Climb a high improvement for this experience. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Now, next up, we have Scanner Sombre, and Scanner Sombre was actually made by Introversion Software. Just a quick backstory in these guys. These are the guys who made Uplink, which is one of my favorite games of all time. Great hacking game. Darwinia, DEFCON, Prison Architect, which they just sold to another company, I believe, and more. I actually picked up this game at launch over 2 years ago. I didn't play it yet, but apparently I was one of only 6,000 people who bought this game. It didn't really sell that well, unfortunately. But the first night I had VR that I was really playing it, my buddy Jay was actually watching me. I set up a private stream for him, and he got to see me play a bunch of games. And I picked up Scanner Sombre just because I was curious. We kept talking about VR and talking about it, and I ended up finishing Scanner Sombre while talking to him. Now, granted, it was like a 2.5 hour playthrough, pretty hefty time investment, but this is the game that I beat. So, how is it? Well, honestly, I don't want to do a full review here. I might touch on it at an end of year wrap up. Maybe I'll do a quick wrap up of about 4 games I have hanging that I probably won't do full reviews on, but not today. That being said, though, the VR for this game actually works pretty well. The game also uses those touch controllers like I'm talking about, and you get a little scanner in your hand that you're going to wave around to scan walls. You're going to see yourself in the darkness. So, in the game, you need to find your way through the caves that you find yourself. And honestly, it's an interesting concept, but I hate to say this. Scanner Sombre isn't a great game, though it is definitely more interested in VR. Now, this is the perfect example of how an average game that can be elevated by the VR headset or just being immersed in it. In fact, I kept saying to my friend that it feels like you're actually in a cave. You're lost in the dark. Like, at the beginning of the game, you literally can't see anything, and it's scary, but it's also really unique. It's an amazing experience, not for people who are afraid of the dark, though. Just trust me, it is pitch black sometimes. Now, the downside of this game is the movement is a little wonky. Now, just to be clear, there are good movement systems out there, and I do think Scanner Sombre overall has a good movement system. But there's a couple places where Scanner Sombre's movement system really took me out of the experience in a bad way, or just made the overall experience harder. And especially when you had to traverse like the small ledge over a chasm, or you had to run away from monsters in like 2 locations, it's just not a great experience there. The thing is, though, Scanner Sombre isn't a great game, but the VR experience itself can be both a boon and a negative, and I think Scanner Sombre is a better game in VR, but admittedly a touch more frustrating. Now, this is where I would give it a medium improvement. It's good, but it's also just a little bit bad. Still, if you do have this game in your library and you haven't played it yet, and you have VR, definitely try it in VR. I think it's better in that form. And finally, we have Super Hot VR. Now, I had high expectations for the other games in this list. The climb had to be great. There was no way the idea wouldn't work. Scanner Sombre is by one of my favorite companies, and Talos Principle is just a great game. Now, I also really like the Super Hot, the original game, without VR, but there's certain things about that game that I'm not a huge fan of. The overall typing motif is a little bit bad, I have to say. The gameplay is good, but it has its limits. I think it runs out close to the end, and I do like that the time moves when you move idea, though. But people really liked Super Hot. Like, I kept hearing about the VR Super Hot. So I might as well had to try it. And dear God, I'm glad I did. This is easily one of the best games I've played so far in VR. The reason for this is several big things, but each one is how the developer redesigned the game from the ground up for VR. They took what was a fantastic idea of a PC game and just threw it in the trash, and they started from scratch to see how they could improve on the experience with VR headsets. Now, the simplest example is how you can beat your first enemy. Admittedly, not the first one in the demo, but there's no weapon. You can just reach out and punch the enemy, and anyone who's within your reach really should be just quickly punched and dispatched, and just touching them pretty much knocks them out. Want to have more fun? You can punch them multiple times in midair. You can keep hitting them if that's fun for you. Personally, I like shooting guns in the air at the end of levels just to waste bullets. Doing the revolver ocelot juggling trick, which I think I try at least once here. It's just really interesting. Now, going beyond that, everything is done in what time moves when you do. By that, it means you can actually see and dodge attacks. And while the game is usually pretty good at guessing where you are or if you're in the way of the projectile, usually erring on the side of allowing you to dodge bullets, which you probably couldn't. It's just so much fun, though. Plus, you can use your hands to block bullets, especially if you have objects in them. It's interesting for that. Of course, shooting is freaking amazing as well, and how well you aim your guns will matter, of course. But the fact is, picking up and throwing guns, objects, throwing stars are almost always spot on, and you can feel how good or bad you are at the motion. And of course, every time you move your hands, you're speeding up time and stopping it by not moving them. Now, super hot is still shouted at the end of the level, super hot. But you're not seeing a replay of your actions. Now, that would totally be sick inducing. Glad that's out of the game. And each level is multiple scenes. Though you're not required to move between the locations, here's where the game's clever. The game actually teleports you. But even beyond that, if you're in the middle of a scene and you duck behind an object, enemies can't shoot you at all. I mean, that's just amazing the first time I did it, and it shows how unique this experience is. It's definitely a lot of fun. Now listen, I clearly like Super Hot VR. There's not even a question about it. And there's even more I want to say about it. They dropped the original story. There's a unique and interesting story replacing it. It can be a little disturbing at times, admittedly. More than a little, probably. But where other games are good, Super Hot is one of those games that changes the entire game when it goes to VR. This is what great VR games need to emulate, because Super Hot is just so much fun to play, and it's so unique. If you have a VR headset, you need to try Super Hot. You know, I was afraid I was going to be playing the same game a second time, and here it's so much better. I don't even think there's a question, though. This is a high improvement for adding a VR headset. I'll even go beyond that. You know, the climb is a high improvement. It's what players should expect. Super Hot is what players should crave. This was just amazing, trust me. You haven't played something like this. And there you have it. 4 games, each done in VR with various successes. Now, this isn't a true review, but if you are curious, I would definitely recommend The Climb for people who want something different. And as you just heard, I obviously recommend Super Hot VR. I think most VR headset owners probably have this game, but dear God, if you don't, you're missing out on one of the best experiences on the platform, I think. Now, perhaps it's not the best. You know, I've picked up at least 12 games for VR. I have even more available, so I will go through a bit more shortly. Maybe we'll do this like a monthly cycle. I will say I do want to talk about Dance Central. I picked it up a day before writing the script. I haven't played enough to really get a full opinion. I do want to do a full review there, though. And I am working with No Man's Sky. That came out, the VR came out on my birthday. And, you know, I do want to fully review that game, see how it's improved over 3 years. The VR definitely will get a section. I won't go into that here. With that said, though, what do you guys think? Are you guys already VR owners? Are you VR fans? Are you VR curious? Or just, you know, perhaps fans of mine? If so, amazing. Thank you, guys. And really, I just want to get an idea of what you guys have for a VR system. Let me know down in the comments. And I ask because I want to know how people will react to like the exclusive titles like The Climb versus Super Hot, which I think every headset can use. Let me know what you're thinking. Of course, consider subscribing if you're interested in more from me in any format. For fans of my other videos, I've said it a few times, but let me reiterate, don't worry, I'm not going only VR. I can't play it that much, but I am kind of interested in it, so we'll cover it a bit more in the future. Next up, though, we do have Slay the Spire. I already have a written story for that, and I do have plans to review Eliza after that, so I got you guys as well. Until next time, though, I am King Link, and thank you very much for watching.